Today, I want to share with you one practice that can change everything about your life. It will create certain experiences that you want to have inside of yourself, and it will also create circumstances and relationships that are the way that you want them to be. So here's a story that brings us into this. I have relationships in my life right now, some of which I really appreciate, and some aspects of some of the relationships that I have, I don't appreciate, right? So there are the way that certain people are in my life that, to be honest, I wish they were a certain way. I wish they were not a certain way and were a certain way, right? I find some people kind of unpleasant to be around. I find some people fantastic to be around, and there are certain people in my life that's not going to change around them being in my life or not. For most of us, that those people are family. Sometimes they're coworkers because we really appreciate most of the job, or it really works, or it's really important for us to to continue doing that right now. And so our colleagues are people that we think we can't change, right? So I have these situations within some of the relationships that I wish were different. A couple things that I've talked about before in some of my content is to not give people a compelling reason to be a way that you don't appreciate them to be. So, for example, if people are angry or frustrated or rigid or reactive, let us not become rigid, reactive, angry about their anger, reactive about their anger, and not give them a compelling reason to keep being the way that they are, but in fact give them a compelling reason to shift into the way that we, in some ways, want them to be, because that would be more pleasant for us, right? So this is the practice. The practice is saying to ourselves and creating the experience and the perception, i.e. reality, that this blank, whatever it is, this relationship, this circumstance, this experience inside of myself even, is how I get what I want. So this relationship, experiencing this relationship in its current form, is how I get what I want. Now, how is that helpful? Well, number one, if we experience this relationship and we're really clear that there are some aspects about this relationship that the other person is presenting, we are becoming more and more clear about what we do want to have in the relationship, in relationships with people. Now, okay, that's the low-hanging fruit of this practice. Like, yeah, I get it. I don't want to have people that are D-bags around me anymore. I know. I already know that, actually. Okay, well, that's the first layer of this, is that this is how I get what I want. Now, one, because I can become more clear on what it is that I want and what I don't want. Number two, this relationship, I'll use this example, helps me understand myself more, right? And just the example that I gave as we started out, the previous teaching that I've offered before, is that if I am getting triggered in a certain way by this thing out there, let's just call it anger or rigidity, and I'm getting triggered by this, that's really helpful to know. Because one of two things is very likely and almost certain. Number one, I have a very similar, but maybe differently expressed rigidity or anger inside of me that this person is highlighting for me. Again, it's often very tempting to get angry by other people's anger, to become rigid by other people's rigidity. I'll never forget this teaching. A friend of mine was coaching me on something about how I got really upset about how this person was acting like a victim in their life. And it was like all these things kind of happened to them, and we were working very closely on something, and it was very aggravating. And I tried bringing it up to her in a gentle way. I didn't use the term victim, of course, but I kind of like tried my way. I wasn't successful with it. I don't think I did a very good job of it. And they didn't change, right? So I brought it up with this person. I was like, I don't know what to do. And this friend, this coach, this great mentor that I had at that time said, well, the first thing you could do is stop victimizing yourself with their victimhood. I was like, okay, that's a really good, I was blown away. My pause there was like kind of my mind being blown. I was very impressed with that insight, because I think people that I work with, people that I see, I could say, maybe not you, but many of us and many people that I know do this thing, right? So we take whatever's not working, this job, this relationship, this physical ailment that I'm having, and we say to ourselves, this is how I get what I want. right? Because number one, we're getting really clear about how this isn't working. Number two, the thing that's not working is highlighting a weakness in our personality, in that we have played a significant role in creating this relationship to be the way that it was. Now, on the practical side, we may have said yes to the job. We have family members. But the way that the main role that we play in this is that if people don't change, I'm going to say another way. One of two things is happening. One, we haven't ended the relationship in a significant way. There are ways to end relationships with family, but not cut off the love. You can do that. You can say this, I choose not to be in this relationship anymore. If it's a job, there's another piece of content that I'll share a little bit of it in this actually around how we can create people to be a certain way by feeding the relationship. So one, it's clear that we don't want this anymore. And number two, we look at how those things out there in the world are inside of us. And then we do our own work to transform them. So how do we do that? How do we transform that aspect of ourselves that we become more aware of vis-a-vis this unpleasant situation? Well, number one, we get really appreciative of this aspect of ourselves. Let's use anger. I do get angry when other people are angry with me, or when other people are like aggressive with me. That's my kind of impulse. I'm like, oh yeah. I don't like that about myself, but that's the catch. We appreciate that the reaction inside of us played a role at some point in our life. And what that does is help soften us to that experience inside of ourselves such that we can appreciate it, but also not indulge in it. Like for me, I was a bully when I was younger, and I was a bully because I was bullied, right? And I bullied other kids when I was in elementary school. I was a liar. I was a manipulator. And I was also experiencing some trauma in early life. So the way that I navigated some of that trauma was becoming a bully towards like kids that were easy to bully. I suck saying that, but they were in that like 8 to 10-year-old part of my brain, right? It was like, for me, I was like, oh, I can take advantage of them, and it had me feel better. And it was brutal. It sucked. I still feel a little sick to my stomach even just saying that to you, right? So I can understand why I have that aggression inside of me sometimes. And I'm also really clear that it doesn't serve me anymore. So in the moment that I realize that it comes up, I can soften around it, take accountability for it myself, and choose something else very quickly. I've been practicing this for many years, and you can do this in your daily life with the same kind of practice, and you can create the way that you want. You can create the life the way that you want. Now let's talk about relationships. This will be the last piece, and I'll start to wrap up here. If there's a relationship that we have that isn't working, I want to share with you a secret around how you can change that relationship, and honestly, how you can change the person, okay? So here's the story the first time I realized this. I had a coworker. She was really unpleasant to me in that time, not objectively probably to the world, but for me, she was very unpleasant. She took over meetings, she overshared, she talked too much. My supervisor at the time, I don't think did a good job at coaching her, kind of managing her, giving that kind of feedback that I think she needed to hear. And it was really unpleasant work environment for me. I didn't really like working with her. I didn't really like doing consultations with her. We were both therapists at that time. And I just was like, I don't know what to do, right? I tried talking to her at one point, didn't really work. Again, I wasn't very skilled at doing that, so it wasn't all about her, certainly. But I didn't know what else to do. I tried all the things I knew how to do. And I had learned this teaching through my spiritual path around how there are 3 aspects to every relationship. There's myself, there's the other person, and there's a relationship itself. Now, the relationship itself gets fed by both the other person and by myself. And if I can take accountability for what I put into my side of the relationship, it gives the opportunity for the relationship to shift in a significant way. So I realized that I was putting a lot of judgment into the relationship with her because I judged her for how she was and how she was acting. Different than like an assessment, or like she did talk more than most people, and she didn't, I don't think, allowed enough space for other people to share, right? And take part in the consultation. But I judged that. It wasn't like what I just said. I was like, she sucks because of that, right? So there was a lot of judgment that I put into it. There was a lot of resistance that I put into it. There was a lot of protection for myself. I just wasn't open with her. I wasn't vulnerable. I wasn't kind, I would actually even say to her. I was cold. So I took accountability for all these different aspects of what I brought into my relationship with her. Even though it was just a work relationship, it's still an empty tube of a relationship that we get to create. And I took all those things back. Now, how did I do that? Well, just with my intention. I was like, I meditate every day. And so during a meditation, actually, I think I did this when I was driving. And I just realized all these things that I had put into the relationship that were unhelpful and just took full accountability for them. Didn't think about or justify why I felt that way or how, just how she could be different, any of that. I just took everything back myself, took ownership for it. And was like, yeah, I am this way. It had me soften a bit. And I practiced this for maybe a couple days, like every time I would interact with her. The next time I went into the office, it was like a week later. I felt different. Right? Because I'd been practicing this, it actually felt better. Before I even saw her, we were in this big company-wide meeting and she saw me enter. She waves me down and is like, I have a seat for you. And I was like, me, we don't really like each other. But she came down, or she waved me over and I came down and sat next to her. And she's like, how's it going? I was like, good. She's like, great. How's your morning? And I was like, oh, well, it's like, I'll tell you later, nice to see you. And she's like, yeah. And we had this great vibe. We didn't talk that whole meeting. We kind of just like enjoyed each other's presence. It was very sweet. And we went into the meeting and I kid you not, she was the way I wanted her to be. Like she was, and nothing had happened. Like no one had had a talk with her. I hadn't had a talk with her. Like she had just been living her life. But I had created her in a certain way by taking ownership of some things that I was putting in the relationship, which somehow freed her up to be a way maybe that she wanted her. Maybe I actually don't know what happened for her, but I created her to be a certain way. Now, again, it wasn't like manipulative. And the reason that this works is because I wasn't coming from a contracted, controlling place, right? Like need her to be a certain way. And if she just was a certain way, then I wouldn't have to feel these things and all of that, right? I got, kind of centered and calm and open and softened around everything. And I took a lot of ownership. So all this practice, not just that, but the practice of looking at how something that's not working for you in your life and thinking about how if I see this relationship, if I'm witnessing this relationship in a certain way, this will get me what I actually want. And everything that's happening for us, and we relate to things that way, that this relationship is how I get what I want through a certain awareness, our whole life will be changed. All my best to you.